So on to the last movie we're discussing, The Changeling from 1980, directed by Peter Medak, written by William Gray and Diana Maddox, who did the screenplay, and then Russell Hunter, who the story is by. And we'll get into Russell Hunter. He actually experienced the story of The Changeling, but we'll get into that a little bit. The composer was Rick Wilkins. It was made for a budget of $6.6 million, and it made $12 million.
Oh, okay. So double the budget. Okay.
So it doubled the budget. Now, the interesting thing is Mick Garris, who's like a big time horror director and like, known for a lot of really good Stephen King collaborations. He cites that he's kind of a gatekeeper for this movie in a sense. And I hate that term, but it does have some merit. Gatekeepers are those people who are like the cool kids, like the hipsters who saw it first. In other words, God. He recalls seeing this movie in a completely empty theater when it first came out, and like being like, he said that the fact that the movie theater was empty like added to his enjoyment, because like he had no distractions from it, and he was one of the first people to recognize, or whenever he got other people into the movie, so that's how he described it, because it wasn't the way it was released, it wasn't like it didn't really set the world on fire, and he was one of those people that was like, shit, you've got to watch this movie, it's really good.
Okay, well, he wasn't so much a gatekeeper, because at least he told people about it. A gatekeeper, I would have felt like would have been like, this movie's great, I hope nobody watches it, so I'm the one who knows about it,
Well, he did have a little bit of that element of like, well, I was there and I recognize its brilliance, and
I saw it before it was cool.
Yeah.
He was like a hipster.
And he brought up the fact that, he's happy now. I mean, and that's kind of anti-gatekeeper. He's happy now that more people are catching on to it. But he said that, he was one of the people who recognized it was good before, the recent resurgence. Because it actually has gained most of its, like popularity in, like, the last, I want to say, 10 years, if not 5.
Yeah.
Just because more people are saying, like, have you seen this movie? Like, I didn't even know this thing existed.
Oh, yeah. I saw it when it first came out. Nobody was even in the theater. Oh, blow me.
Principal players, we have George C. Scott playing John Russell, who's the protagonist and the grieving widower/father. He's a composer and a skeptic. George C. Scott is was an amazing actor. He was one of those actors that if you saw him in a movie, he was very passionate in the movie. He played Patton of all things, so anybody who plays General Patton is going to have to be somebody who's like got a force of will to him, to kind of portray that character right.
Yeah.
He was in Dr. Strangelove. He was in, like we already discussed, he's in one of my favorite versions after seeing it recently of A Christmas Carol. It's like kind of a made-for-TV British film that has George C. Scott playing Ebenezer Scrooge, which is a really good fit for him. And he's also in The Exorcist 3, which a lot of people are coming back now and saying that that's probably, if not the best sequel, it's definitely, some people say it's better than the original Exorcist, which could be heresy, but they cite The Exorcist 3 as being like a legit sequel to The Exorcist.
Wow.
2 sucked, but 3, because of the plot, because it has George C. Scott, and he's more of like a police officer / detective trying to figure out what is going on in the movie, and like he kind of playing that bigger than life forceful character that he because if you look at the man, he looks imposing. I mean, like he was tall and gruff in his face, like it fit. We have Trish Van Devere playing Claire Norman, real estate agent, companion foil to the protagonist, and potentially criminal at her job. Because she allowed him to rent a house that he shouldn't have been able to rent, according to a lady later in the movie.
But why wasn't he able to rent the house, though? We'll have to get into that, because like she just says it, but
because it was a historical house, and I was surprised that they would allow that, because normally the historical societies don't allow you to do shit with a house if they deem it that way. They keep it as like more of a museum piece in a lot of areas. They don't let you actually rent or modify or do anything to it, and like he just rented it, moved right on in, and like start fixing it up.
Yeah, but she had mentioned that, and she was like, we were gonna do this, and this, but I just decided that this is a house that needed to be lived in. So
yeah,
she
but they kind of imply that she didn't have the call to say that.
Oh.
Like she just, she kind of went on her own and is like, this is a hell of a house and I'm getting a good commission off of it, so rent this.
Well, boo frickety who, HOA of America, okay?
Go back, Karen.
Yeah, back it up.
She is the real life spouse to George C. Scott.
Oh, look at that. Woo! She's a babe, too, at least in the movie she was.
Yeah, and good on him because, I mean, you could tell she was quite a bit younger.
Oh, yeah.
It's sad in a way. She starred, I mean, it's in the trivia. She starred in like at least 7 movies with him. So they really cared for each other. I mean, the fact that they worked that, I mean, we talked about Rob and, Sherry on the news. I mean, like this was before that time. I mean, this couple was, acting together. Once they got married, they were inseparable basically.
Yeah.
And of course, he passed away in like the later 80s, so she became a widower of her own, like in real life at a young age. So it's kind of sad for her.
Yeah, and she's 20-ish years his junior.
Yeah. So I mean, good on the two of them. I mean, what love finds a way, almost like a perverse version of Ian Malcolm's Life Finds a Way. So she was in Where's Papa? She was in Day of the Dolphin with George C. Scott. She was in The Last Run with George C. Scott, and she actually did another horror movie the same year that the Changeling came out called The Hearse.
Oh yeah.
We have Ruth Springford playing Minnie Huxley. She is the uptight doomsayer, busybody, and Karen that we were talking about. This said that house should have never been rented. What the fuck is wrong with you?
The head of the HOA.
Yeah. She was just known for playing in TV shows, and she mostly played a biddy in movies. I mean, like she played like the older, like you're not gonna do that type character, like in a lot of stuff. So I
good
guess
job at making people hate you. You're a great actress. You did it.
Yeah, she's like that actor who we was talking about in Ghostbusters who played the EPA agent. I mean, that poor guy. I mean, he was real good at making people hate him too.
Oh
yeah. We have Helen Burns playing Leah Harmon, who is a spiritualist, automatic writer, and helps channel the voice of the spirit in the film. She was in a movie called If You Can See What I Hear, Zorro, and then Zorro the Gay Blade. Which I think's a hilarious name given the context. We have Melvin Douglas, who played Senator Carmichael, the very old man in the movie.
Yes.
He's who was a former orphan, unwitting benefactor to a murderer, the only victim of the spirit in the film that I'm aware of, and he actually is the changeling in the title.
Yes.
What that means, but he is. And he was in Being There is one of his bigger movies. But the funny thing is he made, like right after this, he made another movie called Ghost Story. I think he filmed it the same year that this came out, which is a classic 80s movie about a bunch of older gentlemen telling a series of ghost stories that they all become a part of.
Oh, wow.
And then we have Voldy Way playing Joseph Carmichael, who is the murdered child, violent ghost. He played, which is funny because he played in a movie named Boo in 2005. Many years later, he played Joseph Carmichael. So
wow.
So we've got 2 characters playing Santi. We've got 2 characters playing Joseph Carmichael. That's kind of an interesting correlation. So a changeling, the definition of it is it's historically referred to as an oaf or an elf. It is a human-like creature found in folklore throughout Europe. It was believed to be a fairy that had been left in place of a human that was stolen by the Fae folk. So basically, the fairies would steal your kid, leave a demonic well, they were usually evil, but they would leave a version of your kid that looked exactly like them, but they had no soul, and you were left to raise them, and they generally caused you a lot of mischief, and grief in your life whenever they did that. I think it was an excuse for like Irish and like Celtic people to say this fucking kid has to be from the fucking fairies because he's fucking douchebag. But hey, people can say what they want and make up whatever they want about that stuff. We just call them assholes now. It's like my kid's a pure asshole, and I'm not going to say the fairies drop. It's like I made them. I just, the fairies can take them if they want them.
In Mexican lore, it's not so much like a spirit that comes in and, well, your child doesn't get replaced But, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, if you don't leave a night light on, the bad spirits floating around can reach down and get into your child and you have a bad kid. So when they're babies, until you can get them baptized, so this is more of a Catholic, lore, if you will, a Mexican Catholic lore, because I don't want to put this on all Catholics out there. But yes, until your baby can get baptized, then yes, if you don't have a light on in the room, which how did they do it back in the day when there's no electricity? You lit a candle all night. But yes, the spirits could get your child and you would have a bad kid.
So instead of the kid just being outright replaced, they were... they're still your kid. They just had bad. Now they're possessed by something, basically.
Well, the shell of your kid is there. It's that their spirit has been replaced with a bad spirit.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't know what happens to the good spirit.
It was a wholesale replacement in Celtic lore, so that's and I think but that's where the title, the Changeling, comes from, and we'll get into it as far as the story, why that applies, but. So synopsis of this movie: after losing his wife and daughter, a grieving music composer moves to Seattle to focus on his career. After moving into a rundown mansion, he starts experiencing unexplainable phenomenon. Skeptical but wanting to believe the spirit is that of his recently deceased daughter, Russell begins investigating the haunting. Breaking glass, automatic riding, bouncing rubber balls, and creepy wheelchairs abound. By the time the credits roll, a murder is uncovered and the sins of the father are visited upon the son. In a quite literal sense.
Yes.
So this was actually based on a real life story before we get into the discussion of the movie. Originally happened in Denver, Colorado instead of Seattle. It was based upon the life of Russell Hunter, who, as I said, actually wrote the initial story that they, based the screenplay off of. He was a real life composer. He moved to Boulder to help his parents run their lodge, which is the Three Birches Lodge.
I thought that said three bitches.
You can't read. No.
I need hold on, let me put my CNI glasses on.
put your good eyes on.
Oh my God.
So he worked at the Three Bitches, as we've established, the Three Birches, and moved on whenever it seemed to be back on its feet so he could pursue his music career again. He ended up renting the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion in Denver because the price was too good to pass up.
Oh, isn't it always?
But there's a reason why it was too good to pass up. That's because no one would rent the place for long enough, and they kept leaving. So, and I don't know if that was ever mentioned to him, but he was just like, all right, well, it's dirt cheap. I'll rent it, So it was, it's right next to Cheeseman Park in Denver, which actually had, funny. This actually... Cheeseman Park was actually what I consider to have been the basis for Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. Steven Spielberg actually saw the Changeling right before he made Poltergeist.
Oh.
So this might have had an influence on him. But Cheeseman Park is the real life version of Poltergeist in the sense that there was a cemetery there and they moved the graves, but they didn't move the bodies.
You didn't move the bodies? Oh my God.
And so it's considered super haunted. And not only is it haunted, but every fucking house that's on that connects to it by the street is haunted, including the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion. Look
here's the thing. This is why my body won't be in a grave and why I won't even have a headstone. First of all, I'm not going to waste precious space with my dead body. But okay, what's wrong with these ghosts? Don't you just want people to leave you? Maybe that's a problem. It's a park now. People are treading all over their graves, and they're like, just leave me alone.
In their spot now.
They're just having a picnic. But did you know that back in the day that cemeteries were places where people would go and have picnics, and they would stroll through, and it was considered respectful because it was like these dead people don't have people that visit them. So these were people that were...
Well, the Mexican people still do that on Day of the Dead, don't they? I mean...
Well, we don't go to the graves per se. We do build, little... I always forget what the name is called, but we build like little shrines and we'll put pictures up and candles and food and candy specifically, and stuff like that to celebrate their life. And when back in the day, and I want to say this was more European than anything, but they would go to grave sites. They were like parks. They were really nice places to be. And it was like a representation of, hey, this is life. We're bringing life to a place where it's considered death. And it wasn't scary and it wasn't a weird thing.
But you also got to remember a lot of European cemeteries, if they could, were built at crossroads so that the spirits couldn't leave and follow you back once you were done visiting them.
True,
so they did have like their own like ways of defending against that.
Hey, and there are made of iron gates and there are archways when you're going in.
Yes, that's true. There you go. The trapping the spirits. And they didn't and of course, a park doesn't have any of that stuff, but they also didn't fucking build their houses right beside of the cemeteries.
True.
Whenever, back in the days. I mean, now we kind of have to because we're running out of space, but, All
I'm saying is if I'm a spirit and I'm a body in the ground and my spirit's kind of around the area, I'm really not going to get mad if you move my headstone. And no one's probably visiting me anyway, so,
Well, I mean, if they're old enough, that probably is the case.
Yeah.
Now, the movie does change some facets of the story, but it is relatively the same as what happened to Russell. He experienced very similar things to what George C. Scott experiences in the film. He heard the banging sounds throughout his home, the water running, the walls seemed to expand noisily for no reason, like they were almost breathing, is the way he described it.
Wow.
He hired an architect to check the pipes like George C. Scott does in the movie.
Yeah.
And the difference is in the movie, George C. Scott, and I like this better because I feel like it's creepier. George C. Scott in the movie discovers the attic that's been sealed off by himself, whereas in real life, Russell, actually found him and the architect found that room in a closet, but it happened the same way. They were investigating. They're like, this is an actual door behind this closet, and they found their way up into that creepy attic. And up inside of the attic, they found a 100-year-old journal that belonged to a young child.
And Frank?
Russell? No, that was a little, well, that was after her time, but she wasn't it was the wrong country. So you was close, though. Russell hired a medium to help him communicate and lead him to another Denver location. So just kind of like they hired a medium in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And that was previously a field. When he got there, it was no longer, the place they were told to go by the spirit, quote unquote, if you believe it or not, was no longer just a field. There was actually a house there.
Oh,
so
shit. Just
I don't
like
know how they did this, but they convinced the homeowners to let them dig beneath the floorboards of the house. And lo and behold, there was the remains of a child there, This led to the conclusion that the wealthy couple that had previously lived in the home had covered up the death of their child. And the reason they would have done this, and the theory was they went to a local orphanage and got another child about the same age and appearance, and so that they wouldn't lose their inheritance that was promised to the grandchild, because the way that it was is that the person who was going to be, giving him the money hated the son-in-law. It was their daughter that married this guy, and they had the kid, so they were going to give their money to the kid instead and bypass him. There was kind of their hatred of him was that bad. So whenever the couple realized that because their kid had a lot of health issues and he passed on his own, is the story. So when they realized that they were going to lose this massive inheritance, these assholes literally went to an orphanage, got a kid that was similar in appearance and age. They took the kid over to another country, put him in a boarding school for a while, so that when he came back aged up, even if he looked different, nobody could tell, because hey, it's been a while since we've seen him, so there he is. And this kid went his entire life without knowing that he wasn't the original child that was that their kid.
I wonder how old he was when they did this, because in this movie he was 8 years old. But all an 8-year-old knows is I'm finally getting adopted by a wealthy family, nonetheless. And my new name is Joseph, and I'm going to this fancy boarding school. And when I come back, I am the child of this person, which, you never question adopted or anything like that. I mean, nobody ever really brings that up. I'm the adopted child. Although
I think it was even worse because he was slightly younger. I think he was 5 or 6. So you really don't question if you're that young.
Oh, 100% you won't. Yeah.
So Russell reportedly came back to the home after finding the body, and the spirit became violent at that point. As opposed to him thinking that it was going to thank him and like maybe dissipate, it shattered glass from a nearby door, causing him to have an arterial cut.
Wow.
Which caused him a lot of bleeding.
Damn.
And as he was in the bed trying to stem the blood flow, the roof collapsed over his bed, nearly killing him. Later that night. So he left that house and only returned to see the place demolished and be replaced by a high-rise. Now, unfortunately, one of the developers of that high-rise that helped demolish the mansion, she developed breast cancer and died in her 40s. So, curse?
Yeah.
Possibly. And then... So the guy who was telling the story about this, because there was a guy that wrote a book, and it was on and he kind of a weird guy, I gotta admit, but like he was, kind of those paranormal historians or whatever for the area. He was talking about it, and he said, now it raises an interesting question. What happens to the ghost once the dwelling that they, were, trapped in, like we've discussed, is no longer there? Are they freed? Well, the funny thing is that children in Cheeseman Park have reported seeing a child in old, outdated clothing playing with a striped rubber ball that matches the one that was found inside of the William Tree mansion.
Wow. That's really cool. I mean, basically that was the Changeling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the film. Ratings, Reverend?
My rating after discussing the film just now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm joking.
I mean, that's such a fucking good story. Why not make a movie out of it?
It is. And they did. They clearly did.
And they did spoiler alert for my review. They did a damn good job of it too. I mean,
I feel like something was touching my
foot. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I mean, because it doesn't go super out there, but the scenes because you got George C. Scott by himself in a lot of the movies.
Yeah.
The scenes by himself where the balls bouncing down the steps, or they're pretty. I mean, they work on you if you're in the right frame of mind whenever you're watching it. It's different sensibilities, I know. I mean, now we're used to seeing grinning rictus faces from the Ring. But speaking of which, this is my favorite Ring movie, and we'll get into why. But I think the Ring author stole this movie, and we'll get into, I really think he did.
I knew when I saw it, and you told me, you're like, when you see it. I mean, I knew, but I wasn't going to discuss it at the time. But yeah, okay. So what was definitely so great about this movie is that I was still able to watch it and stay intrigued with no real visual of any kind of spirit whatsoever. I mean, you knew stuff was happening, and it was inferred that the spirit was there based by certain things that were happening. So it was basically only sound and, music.
There's one thing that happens, and it's kind of creepy. He goes upstairs to that lone bathroom where the bathtub is at, and the water's running, and you can see the face of the child beneath the waves of the water.
I must have completely missed that. I mean, I did see that in two other scenes. Obviously, the one where it shows the child how he was done in, and then of course the girl that kept seeing him in her room.
Yes. But there is the scene where you can see the child's face beneath water, which is another tie to the Devil's Backbone. We got these two kids in water.
Yeah.
That's how they died,
Yeah. And I was more impressed at how I stayed interested. The scenery and the actors really sold this film. They are the ones that made everything seem so real. I think every actor in this film did a good job, minus the cop that just kind of showed up for whatever reason he showed up.
Oh, yeah, but he died shortly thereafter, flipped upside down.
He was the only one that was he was there, he served a purpose, but that was pretty much about it. So I take that
back. He's not he that was the one other character that maybe died from the spirit was the cop. I forgot about him until you mentioned that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, because obviously they needed him to convince Joseph, the Changeling Joseph, to show up, Yes.
So
I don't know, when we're talking about, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into cinematography and if you want to get into music.
here's what I'm going to go through them real quick. So, because this movie is all about the story and this movie is all about the acting, just like you said, I 100% agree. That's the main thing I was going to focus on, was the acting whenever I got to this movie. So cinematography, I didn't realize this, but there is a lot of wide angle lens and a lot of low angle use in this movie. And what it conveys without you realizing it till you think about it is you're seeing George C. Scott from the perspective of the ghost.
Yes, that makes sense.
Every fucking time that you see him, because it's way behind him and it's on the floor almost, and looking up at him. And it's kind of creepy because it's always looking over his shoulder, so it adds that element. It's like you're not with George C. Scott, you're the ghost spying in on him.
Okay, that makes sense. That's a good little creep factor.
The music is actually pretty good in this movie. Now, it doesn't stand out dramatically. I mean, like, it's not, Danny Elfman or anything, but if you notice it, because the composer mentioned it, and it's there whenever you listen for it, the theme of this movie is grief. It's because George C. Scott is grieving the loss of his wife and his daughter. Yeah. So, like, all the music is sad in tone. Like, there is not, like, there's no happy-go-lucky music in this movie.
Oh, no.
It's really, like, it's that orchestral music, or, like the piano music, and it's really, like, like lonely and haunting more than anything, Now, we've already discussed the story, basically, because it's based on that, story from Russell. I love the twist on what happened to the ghost, like the kid, and like I like the change that he did with they put the kid in the well. I mean, because we gotta bring that up. That's the reason I think that the director of the writer of the Ring stole from this movie. The fact that the kid's actual body was inside of a well beneath a house that nobody knew was, even there was a well there.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
which doesn't, I still don't understand why he's trapped in the mansion, though.
Because the mansion is where he was officially killed.
Yeah.
His body was dumped somewhere else by the family so that they wouldn't get in trouble. And they owned the in the movie, they owned that piece of land where that house was at and the well was at.
Yeah.
And they were the ones, the dad, because that's another link to the Ring. The dad was the one who took the kid after he, basically drowned him in the bathtub, took him and like dumped his body down this well on a piece of property that was way off far from where they actually had the house at. And then they sealed the well up and then left it there. So very much like the Ring. I mean, I'm sorry, but like, there has to be some link there. The guy who made the Ring like novel had to have like worked, looked at this at some point. Like, there's too much time.
There's way, the two of them. There's it's way too many direct ties into it.
The way that there's not necessarily like, there's not the TV element, obviously, or anything like that. But I mean, there's a lot of like the basic stuff. And I'll be honest with you, the thing that I love about this movie is that the ghost, and the director even confirmed this on the commentary, the director believes in the paranormal. The director, Peter Medak, believes that he has been haunted, not in a bad way, but like his older brother died whenever his older brother was like 16 or something. Aww. And he feels like his older brother's always been there with him. Yeah. Because he's seen him on occasion. So whenever he went to this movie, he was really interested in it from the, real life paranormal aspect. But the other thing that he liked about it was that the automatic writing, the way that they did the EVP, even though it was analog, that's all like realistic ghost hunting stuff.
It
like,
really is.
Banging on the walls and everything. That's the kind of stuff you would actually see on Ghost Adventures. It's not like, you're not going to see Santi, but you will hear somebody banging on the, like the walls or something. And that's more realistic is what people experience in a haunting. And that's what he was drawn to and wanted to emphasize.
I really loved how they did the actress who was just scribbling on the page until words started coming. I thought that was amazing.
That is the first time in a film that they showed what automatic writing was. Like, it was a concept, but this is the first time it's ever been shown.
I never knew about it.
That was cool. So that's the story elements of it, and I love the whodunit aspect, like him trying to solve the murders. And I'll tell you something else that ties it to the Ring. In the Ring, they're trying to figure out, Samara, like her parents, like what happened to her and all that stuff. So they go and they investigate, because that was a big contention between me and Noah. He said, well, they had to show the investigation because they wasn't psychic like in the original.
Yeah.
And I agreed with him that they did, but they didn't have to go, keep showing scene after scene after scene. This movie does it so much better. It's so simple. George C. Scott goes to the local library. He does like the I forget the name of the little film that they use, the microfiche, I think's the name of it. And it's actually his wife in the movie, in real life, but the real estate agent, because she's got better eyes than him, which is actually very realistic because he's an older man. But like, she's like, wait a minute, right there. And like they slowly through microfiche and one location figure out what happened to this kid. And I love that element of this movie because it still gives you the investigation, but it narrows it down to where it's not then you don't feel like they're spending like half of the runtime going from place to place. Like what happened here, like they narrowed it down.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the investigation was definitely needed. I felt like it went on for a long time. This movie felt longer to me than it needed to be, but at the same time, I'm very torn because everything in it felt necessary. It was useful. There wasn't anything trashy that I would be like, oh, well, we didn't need that, I don't know. For some reason, it just felt so long to me.
That's what I felt with. I mean, I can't hold that against you because that's what I felt in The Ring, like the American version. Like it just kept lingering on. I'm like, okay,
can y'all just die already?
Yeah, it's like, so we know that they've got to get to this point. They got to get to the well. So how much more like filler are we going to get before they get there? So I can get it. And literally this movie's the same thing. When are they going to get to the well? When are they going to figure it out? But it's the acting in this movie that sells it. I mean, speaking
100%.
of the story, like that scene where George C. Scott is sitting there listening to the playback of the EVP and it focused in, and the director did a wise choice. He focused in on George C. Scott's face and just seeing his face go from like, just curious to like, almost like in tears, but without actually crying, like in the one scene. I mean, that's great acting. Like,
the realization on his face.
Yeah. And I mean, and the thing is about George C. Scott that they bring out in the commentary is that George C. Scott was not really known to be like this, like his characters were always like the kind of the tough guys, like even Ebenezer Scrooge in that one that he did later, The Christmas Carol, he's, the gruff, like, but like this movie, he's an artist and he actually does a very good job of portraying that. I mean, he's not like, he's, very like whenever he's teaching the students and he's going all about that, it's like you're seeing a different aspect of him as a person than what he normally portrayed in movies. So I like that aspect. I mean, it was really showing that he could act that part of like more of a thinker type person more than a man of action, if he had to. But speaking of that, I mean, it was more believable for me to believe that somebody who looked like George C. Scott would stay there and deal with the shit that he did in that house without running away, because if it'd been anybody else, like I was thinking if they did a remake, and they're talking about it, by the way, they're talking about doing a remake of this movie. If they do a remake and they cast somebody like, say, Zac Efron, like, Pretty Boy or something like that, I don't believe that motherfucker's going to stay there and get shit done whenever he starts seeing like a ghost, that rubber ball bouncing down the steps, or like nearly getting knocked off of a railing by like this old antique wheelchair. But I can believe George C. Scott would stay there because he's like, fuck it, you're not going to run me out of this place, just like we were talking about earlier. He's like, I'm going to stay here until I figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the people have to stay at these places, and this is how the movies are made, but I'm like, all the time, I'm like, why? Why are you still there?
And part of it, too, is the reason he stays through the biggest bulk of it until the EVP and it reveals that its name is Joseph.
Yeah.
Is because he's always thinking that it's his daughter. Because the bouncing ball ties back, very smartly at the beginning of the movie whenever the maid who's cleaning up his apartment in New York drops the ball out of there, and he has that horrific scene where he's remembering his daughter playing with it. Yeah. And, and then like so when he sees the ball come down the steps, he thinks that's his daughter. So he's hoping that that's like he keeps staying in the house for the longest time before the ghost reveals its actual name, because he thinks that his daughter's trying to communicate with him, which is, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Um, and his wife did a great job in the movie too. There's something we'll get into the trivia about that, but I mean, she's better than Sherry Moon. Just gotta throw it out there. I mean, she can act. I mean,
yes. I mean, together they were very natural, which makes sense that they're married.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because they already knew how to work with each other outside of, all that to begin with.
Yeah, and I was thinking, too, I was like, I was thinking that at some point in the movie they were going to become love interests because they were together all the time and they were doing this investigation, and that did not happen, but, I mean, it didn't need to happen, but now I'm like, oh, they're married. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it came close enough to where you thought it was going to happen, but it pulled back at the last minute because, like you said, it didn't need to be in the story that way. It didn't help the story by that being in there.
Yeah.
I thought that the older actor who played, Senator Carmichael did a good job with what he was given. I mean, he wasn't in the movie a whole lot, but I mean, as the Changeling, he, conveyed the right, sort of like, being upset and disturbed by the fact that, well, if you realize that your whole life was a lie, I mean, he did a good job of conveying that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what would you think about the, acting in the movie?
Like I said, I thought everyone involved really did a great job, minus, like I said, that cop that was in it for maybe 10 minutes tops, if even that, which is fine. I mean, he wasn't horrible or anything, but you got George C. Scott by himself just pulling the emotions out of everything he can, relating to, you got the tragedy at the beginning that was merely 2 to 3 minutes long, that kind of draws where his emotions are coming from. Yep. You got you get to see kind of his personality a little bit at the college when he's teaching that composing class or whatnot. He's got a little bit of humor.
And whenever he's hobnobbing with some of his, college elite friends that are Senator Carmichael's get together, you kind of see some of his outside interaction, when he's not, cooped up in the house by himself. So that helps too.
Yeah. So, and he carried majority of the film. Then, of course, you got his wife, like I said, who was just a really great, I mean, obviously great companion in life, but also great companion in the film where she's just kind of helping him get shit done. The Karen was hilarious. The senator, when we kind of get to his story, he doesn't know what's going on, but he seems suspicious. At first, I thought that the senator was the actual dad, just super old. It was 50 years later, but I don't know how old he was when he killed his son. He could have been in his 20s or 30s, and in that case, he would have been 80-ish, He could have still technically been alive.
Yeah. It went outside. I kind of thought that too. I mean, whenever I first saw it, I was just like, I think this is the dad. What is he going to have to, but and then you find out that he was actually the poor orphan that was thrown into all of that.
Which I'm sorry, but the actor looked older than 58 because that's how old this kid would have been.
He was in his 80s, I think, at the time this movie was filmed. But the only thing that sold that was the fact that, George C. Scott was very, old for the movie too. And, it helped having Senator Carmichael be older than him just because it kind of sold the time difference just a little bit, that way.
Yes. So, yeah. I mean,
but I agree with you. The time frame of when it happened, it's kind of okay.
Yeah. Putting 2 and 2 together. I don't know. I think overall, everybody really added greatness to this movie because, again, you don't have any ghostly visuals, really. Yeah, you see the kid underwater, but it's a regular kid underwater. It's not a ghostly looking kid.
Oh yeah, they don't change his appearance at all.
Yeah,
so there's none of that.
And you have very, very little visual effects. Where yes, you see the wheelchair moving. I think the noises and the music was more of what kind of drew everything else in together as well.
And I think that's what a lot of people, whenever they cite this movie, that's what they always bring about is the fact that it works so much with just basic stuff like that and, and gets the point across. Whereas you've got some of these high budget movies, that have literally a black cat jumping at you, every 2 seconds and you walk out of the movie. And which I loved on Community, their, zombie episode. It's they're in the basement and the cat keeps jumping out and Jeff is like, who's throwing that cat? But you walk out of some of those movies now, and I mean, other than the initial jump of having something the loud sound and all that, you walk out of the movie and you're like, I was bored, that's the feeling you get walking out of them. And it goes back to what we said about Del Toro, like the best way to build up horror in something is more about the context of the situation. And I mean, like, that's what they did, like putting George C. Scott by himself in this huge, which that's another thing. This is kind of a gothic romance of its own, because you think about it, if the gothic romance is like, you have the spirit, you kind of have a little bit of the repressed love. I mean, him and there is something between him and the realtor, and it doesn't get expressed. So that's a real gothic romance because they don't actually act on it.
Well, you also have the feeling he lost his love, his wife, so you have that.
Yeah, and then you also have the fact that he's in this huge mansion, which is the large structure we talked about,
swallowing him up,
swallows the person up. And there's a lot of archways in the house. I mean, so it kind of ties in that way too. I
wonder if they intended that, though. Obviously, Guillermo del Toro does, but very interesting.
I don't think they intended it, but like they worked the gothic narrative or the gothic romance into it without meaning to. And I think that's just, but the story itself worked it in there because the guy rented a mansion. So it kind of, all worked out that way.
Yeah, which is I don't know. Like, again, all this had to happen to make the story work, but what the fuck, dude?
They did comment, though, that the guy originally, rented the house because the music room and the big rooms offered a better acoustic sound that he could practice his music better at. And that makes sense in the context of the fact that even in the movie with George C. Scott, like his character would be, he was all about the sound. Like he would sit there and play it and record it and, and play it back. And one thing I got to throw out there, it's well done, and it's really creepy when he realizes that the music he's been making inside the house is that music box.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and
that's a good tie-in.
It was. And you know what? Also, I liked how that music box, I mean, it was almost like the Duffer Brothers, where you see something, but it plays in a little bit later, and it does,
They do that several times in this movie. The rubber ball at the beginning, like I said, the music box. I mean, of course, toward the end of the movie, that little medallion or whatever that the St. Christopher's or whatever it is. I mean, that the original orphan had, that he finds in the body, and then that the Changeling has, Senator Carmichael.
Yeah,
like that all figures in, because that's actually how the ghost is. And I love that part of it too. It doesn't, like the movie doesn't destroy its own interior logic, because even though the kid's only affecting the mansion, when that medallion that belonged to the kid, which has part of his essence literally on it from where it was on, next to his dead body, is put next to the one that Carmichael has inside of his, like senatorial suite or whatever he's got, his office. That's when the ghost is able to get its revenge on Carmichael. It's only whenever the two of them are brought together.
Which, I mean, I felt that was unjustified, because the guy playing Joseph Carmichael, he didn't know.
And I agree with you. I mean, the ghost, and that's another reason why this is a gothic romance. The ghost is a bad guy in this sense, because the Changeling didn't deserve what happened to him. He didn't know that. I mean, he wasn't complicit in any of that. He didn't even know that his father swapped him out. Because you can tell whenever George C. Scott reveals what happens to him in a very matter-of-fact, direct way, which is what George C. Scott was known for. Like when he leaves, that guy is shaking to his core. I mean, like that guy comes in, he's like, "Can I help you, Senator?" He's like, he's shaking literally and figuratively, and he's just like, "No, get out!" Like, he's dealing with the fact that like, this terrible thing happened. And and he had no control over it, but he was complicit in it, whether he wanted to be or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like, okay, like that's why I was like, it would have made more sense if it was the dad, because the dad still could have been older than George C. Scott's character.
Yes. Yeah, he could have.
And then it would have made more sense that the ghost attacked, because it's like, you're the one who killed me. But the kid didn't know. So I don't know. It is what it is. It happened how it's happened. I do like how the ghost got real violent after you thought that good was happening. Like they got the, it was almost like Samara. You got the bones, so you're going to put them at rest. Everything's going to get better. Just kidding. Surprise, motherfucker.
It's like, I'm going to kill the realtor lady. I'm going to try to like knock her over some railing or whatever. Like and actually, no, it tried to run her down with a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And then whenever George C. Scott said, told her to get out and he would take care of it, the whole place was on fire at that point. And as he was trying to make his way up there, it was so forceful that it nearly, it caused him to fall off the banister, which, was a sad callback to the orphanage in a sad way. But like, I mean, so it was physically attacking all of them. And at the same time, all that was happening, it was killing Senator Carmichael in his mind, or giving him a heart attack or an aneurysm, whatever happened to him, and so all that stuff, and I love how that all played together. But yeah, it was very violent. Like, I mean, this ghost kid was a bad ghost.
Yeah, he had some time to fester, Hey, just like in Supernatural, the longer you let them stay, the worse it's gonna get. So you want to get them to where they need to go, and fast.
That's a good point. Maybe that's why Santi was a better ghost, because he hadn't been a ghost that long before Carlos showed up. I mean, he still had his humanity about him. He hadn't lost it yet.
Yeah.
So do you want to go on in the trivia? I mean, like, I mean, we'll get into the review, but like, I mean, I feel like we've kind of discussed the movie, as it were.
Yeah, let's get into some trivia.
So Martin Scorsese, or Scorsese, as some people say, lists this as one of his 11 scariest films of all time. In a featurette on the DVD release of the 1996 horror film Scream, actress Neve Campbell named The Changeling as the scariest film she had seen.
Okay, come on, guys.
Well, I mean, some people are scared of Doctor Strange too, so I mean,
Okay.
At least they're quoting actual horror movie here by saying that The Changeling, because it's a good horror film, even if I don't believe it's the scariest either. But
I'll give them that.
Medak reports feeling the need to direct the movie immediately after finishing the script, or finishing reading the script. He said the script itself conveyed the fear that he actually, I mean, and that's pretty good implication that he's going to have a good movie. He said when he read the script, he was actually frightened by what he read, just thinking about it, like in terms of just, like mentally. And, that always, that's a good setup to make a movie later on, because you've already got the built-in like structure that you need. And then of course I said, like I said earlier, his own belief in the supernatural drew him to the movie.
Yes.
This was one of the first films to show automatic writing. It was later featured in films like The Others, which we may or may not talk about if we have the time. But in the movie The Others, whenever they show the scene with automatic writing, they stole it from this movie. And I'm not saying they stole it in the sense that, they literally, the people who made the movie confessed that they saw The Changeling and said they wanted that in the movie. So it did influence that.
Rip off.
This plot is clearly the basis for Ringu. We've already discussed that, but I mean, it is. I don't know if they ever admitted that in real life. I mean, the author, but come on, it's there.
Yeah.
The opening scenes in New York were shot first. It was set in Seattle because Vancouver offered a tax break.
Wow.
And they could do establishing shots in Seattle, but then they did the bulk of their filming, or 80% of it, in Vancouver, which is enough to get their tax break there.
That's so fucking funny. I mean, it makes sense on a business perspective, but it's like, we got a tax break if you film here.
And it helped offset the budget. The two cities were close enough in appearance for one to substitute for the other. The exterior to the house was completely fabricated.
Wow.
They built that over an existing modern home, or at least for that time period, 1980s, in Vancouver, that had the surrounding landscape that they wanted. So it had the yard and everything that looked right. They just, the house itself was way too modern looking, so they built like the actual mansion itself the way it looked on the outside of it. It's all, I mean, smoke and mirrors. It's almost like if you ever saw Blazing Saddles and how they built that town, where it was literally just like one board that was painted to look like an entire building. That's kind of what they did.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we've seen that. That doesn't surprise me.
The fire that took over the house at the end of the film was very real, and it got out of control.
Oh, shit.
They were lucky that no one was hurt, but they did not anticipate the inferno that they started whenever they first set it on fire.
Holy shit.
And they admitted this too. They were like, I mean, you could tell they were still sweating bullets even this many years later, just looking at what, how it went about.
Was this like a curse of the film by any chance?
What's that?
Was this like some sort of curse of the film? Like, could that be?
They didn't say that. They just they didn't recognize when they set that blaze that it was going to go as fast as it did, and they had people standing by to kind of help them reel it in, or they thought, but then whenever it started, they're like, no, that's outside our scope, and
shit.
And I think that it came about so quick that they really didn't even have time for the fire department to make its way there in order to kind of touch with it. So. Good that nobody got hurt, I guess.
Yeah.
The funny thing is the doors to the fake exterior were very real, though. They were actually real. The doors to the house that you keep seeing George C. Scott open.
Yeah.
And they were worth a lot of money.
Well, they were fucking antiques. Gorgeous.
They were antiques on loan from England. So they, so when the house caught fire, the set designer had to actually risk his own body to rescue them before the fire got to him.
Oh my God. I wonder if he got hurt at all.
They said nobody got hurt, so but they said it came close. Like he was literally like patting flames away as he was yanking them off the hinges.
The doors, get the doors. Hold the door.
Hold the door. Hold the door.
Oh my God.
The property used for the mansion exteriors was redeveloped after principal photography and has since been subdivided into the multiple lots with homes. Only the street lamp and the fire hydrant seen across the street when when John or George C. Scott first views the property remain as they do during the filming. So it's drastically different now than it used to be.
Yeah.
The actors, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, actors Trish Van Devere and George C. Scott were married publicly for this picture. It was stated that publicity for this picture stated that they had made 7 films together in their 8 years of marriage, this being their 8th.
I mean, that's the hardest part of actors being married is always being separated from each other. And obviously they were not separated from each other. Not often anyways, because they were making films together. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And this was the 8th movie they made together. So
wow.
That's a good stretch. I mean, that actually beats, I think, Rob Zombie and Sherry, if people want to complain about that.
Yeah.
The producer of this film states, however, that just because they were actually happy and got lucky in a sense. I mean, not saying anything bad about Devere, but whenever she was initially brought up as being like a package deal with George C. Scott, he said that he was willing to step in and say something if her quality of her acting wasn't up to what they needed for the film. But they felt like she did it was a great addition to the movie, so it didn't end up being a matter anyway.
Yeah, she didn't have one of those "I'm riding the coattails of this man" vibe at all.
No. She was right there with him as far as and maybe that's why they had such a good relationship, because they were both good at their job and what they did, and they didn't have to worry about it wasn't nepotism. I mean, I feel like that's the way Flanagan is with Kate. I feel like the two of them know, he's a director, he knows his craft, she knows the acting part, and they work well together because they know how to work within that frame. And I don't know, with Rob, I can see the point there a little bit, because some of the movies, he brings Sherry in on, he puts her in a prominent role, and she doesn't necessarily need to be there for that role.
Yeah.
It works in Lords of Salem sometimes, but she's, and the baby character and, the House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Reject, but those are kind of Lords of Salem is the one movie where I can point to, just, on tangent about her, that she actually shows some acting chops in the sense that she's not playing a very out there character. So she's actually acting naturally within that, but she's also playing kind of like a DJ character in that, like a radio DJ. And I kind of feel like all those years that she worked with Rob, that's something she might have picked up as far as a way to interpret that, naturally anyways. That's kind of, him being in his sphere of influence, she would have got that. But that's what some people have worried about her as Lily in the Munsters, because is she just going to do an imitation of the original actress? Is that how she's going to go about it?
Sherry Moon has her own set of skills, and she can build upon those, but I think she thinks she has a wide range, and I'm afraid that that's not going to go as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think she does have a wide range. I mean, she's a beautiful woman and she's she's great at modeling. I mean, obviously that's what her career was, but I don't necessarily think that that's not a skill set that
No, yeah.
is one-to-one and by any means. I mean,
Yeah, and it's okay to have a small set of skills and to build on that. You don't have to be good at everything,
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with Rob throwing her in the movie. I mean, obviously it's his wife and he loves her and he wants her, just like we were talking about George C. Scott and DeVere, like they want to be together on their projects. That's fine, but like maybe Rob don't like make her the focus of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having her be like a side character that comes in there at some point. It's like the Halloween movies. I don't feel like she was a good mom to Michael Myers in those movies that he did. Like, but whatever.
You're too hot.
We'll get into that debate when we do the slasher seasons.
Yeah.
Medak said that he was initially intimidated by the stories of actor George C. Scott because he was notorious. A lot of people claimed in Hollywood that he was difficult to work with. But the only trouble that they had with George C. Scott on the set, because they said he was a pleasant guy to work with, and he actually gave them a lot of insight into how the character needed to be and all that, because he was a veteran actor. But they said the only problem he had was that he was known to play like his own like solo chess game in his trailer. And one of the days the production managers accidentally they moved his trailer because they needed to like do something, and they knocked over his chessboard and that kind of pissed him off a little bit.
Well, boo frickety who, dude.
But they didn't say that he like took it, like real mean or anything. But that was the one thing that they noticed that he had a little bit of an issue with in the filming.
My God.
He did learn how to play. We talked about, Joseph Quinn and, playing Master of Puppets. Well, George C. Scott did actually learn how to play the music of the piece of classical music that he plays on the piano for the college students. That's actually him playing that.
He too played Master of Puppets in the behind the scenes. And I was kidding. On piano.
Yeah, on piano, before it was ever released, George C. Scott was the first person to actually play Master of Puppets.
Which means Lars owes him some royalties.
Yes. I think that's neat, though, that he was able to do that. I mean, because I didn't notice when he was playing the pianos. They didn't cut away, so I was like, he's actually playing that. So.
I was wondering. I was like, I'm not good enough to know whether or not they're playing the right keys or whatnot, so...
Screenwriters Diana Maddox and William Gray spent around 6 months doing research for the picture, which included copious newspaper articles on parapsychological encounters, even over 700 books and almost 2,000 case histories they poured over for this movie to kind of get like the paranormal, like realistic paranormal stuff that they got in the movie. So that's good on them. I wouldn't have spent that much time, but hey.
Yeah. All right.
It was filmed from December 4th, 1978 until February 25th, 1979, but was not released until March of 80. So it was technically filmed in the late 70s, but didn't come out till 1980.
Damn, that's a long-ass turnaround. That's normal for back then, though.
Yeah. This is the first on-screen appearance of actor Joshua Jackson, who is a little baby several months old in one of the scenes because his mom was a production assistant on the movie.
Just a little baby.
Although Rick Wilkins is the credited film composer, the music box composition is actually written by Howard Blake. The unabridged composition is featured in his life cycle collection of 24 piano works in 24 keys. So they did get, for the one scene with the piano music, they got in Howard Blake. The drowning of Joseph in the bathtub was shot after principal shooting had wrapped. They actually went back and filmed that scene and added it to the movie later. And there's a goof in this movie in the scene where the ball drops down the stairs with Claire freezing in fright. Just prior, she and John have had a spat in which she shouts, "Stop it, George," which is funny because she was calling her husband by his real name and not the character's name. That's but so I guess if you've lived with somebody long enough, you're "Stop it, George." It's like, okay. And I got to give her credit for something because I just realized this. There is a scene in the movie toward the end of it, right before the shit goes down, where he's in the room. I think it's not the piano room, but I think it's the room where the seance was done.
Yeah.
and she's standing at the base of the stairs looking up, and the look on her face is so, I mean, she sells it. So I was scared just seeing her face.
I was like, she could see the ghost. What? The ghost is right there.
I was like, what the fuck is she seeing? Because I mean, that's how good she was. So, I mean, like we said, she was a good actress. I mean,
yeah.
You know, a remake has been in development by Cornerstone Films since 2018, but as of yet, no release date. So I don't know how I feel about that. You know, a lot of modern remakes go the opposite route. They sacrifice the atmosphere and the story for cheap scares. So
there's probably gonna be a lot more visuals in it, and I don't know that would take away. And if they do have that, they better be fucking good.
Yeah, they're going to have their own version of the rictus grin, and even then, I don't know. I don't know if I want that, but we'll see whenever it happens.
Yeah, the fact that you didn't see anything in this film was just a whole different experience for me.
It's a good it's a good companion piece to The Devil's Backbone, because you get the ghost all the time in that movie.
Yeah,
for good reason, because he wants you to get used to the ghost, and in this movie you never see the ghost. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting.
It's a nice sister story. No, I was kidding.
It's feminine versus no.
Yeah.
So what do you think on your ratings of this? Because I know what I like or what my ratings are, but you can tell me yours.
Okay, are we just rating The Changeling? Are we going to start with The Devil's Backbone?
Devil's Backbone first.
Devil's Backbone. I'm going to get that one a 4 out of 5. I mean, it was, I don't know. 4.5 out of 5. There we go. It was almost perfect. It was scary. I didn't know that Guillermo del Toro didn't want you afraid of the ghost, because I was at first, but you kind of always are until you know what's going on. You know,
he did want you to be. He wanted you to be like Carlos. He wanted you to be scared at first, because you would be if you were Carlos. But then, as you got to know Santi, then you kind of warmed up to him a little bit, because he's not an evil ghost.
Yeah, so I don't know. I really, the scenery was good. The ghost wasn't cheaply done. The colors were amazing. In fact, the fact that they used different colors at different times really fucking worked with the film. And this is how those Japanese blue light films should have been filmed. It's like, okay, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I get what Noah was saying on The Ring, where it's got that sickly blue-green color, but it's way overused. It's way. I mean, you don't get any, like, you got to have a breather from it in order. I mean, for it to have the punch that it does. Because if you're just stuck in it the whole movie, then it kind of, you get numb to it. Well,
and the scenes are just so much more memorable. I mean, when you were talking about the scene, you said that, well, this was my favorite scene. It wasn't one I listed as my favorite, but it was the ghost standing in the hallway or the archway, and you've got the red and the oranges behind him and everything. I knew what you were talking about right away. You hadn't even said the reds yet. You're like, oh, he's standing in this, and I'm like, oh yeah, it had these colors in it. I know what you're talking about. It just they stand out.
And that is the part that stands out. I mean, I like the story in it, obviously. I mean, it's got that adventure story we talked about, but it's the art direction. This movie, you got to give credit to Guillermo del Toro. Like, I mean, the guy knows. I mean, he's an artist at heart. I mean, his sketchbook is famous for a reason. He draws this stuff before he ever makes in the storyboards. I mean, it looks like almost a painting at times.
Yeah.
And like his notes. So, I mean, you can tell the guy's artistic, and that's what he brings to his movies. And you got to appreciate it if you care about that at all.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a 5 out of 5. I mean, I thought going back and rewatching it that it would lose something for me, but no, just seeing the way he designed the ghost, the colors that he used, and everything else. I mean, it's a movie I can go back and rewatch. I mean, as much as Pan's Labyrinth, and I feel like that's a great film too for like its creativity, because those designs of that like creature that's got like the eyeballs and it's like hands or whatever, I mean, there's some freaky shit in that movie, but like, I mean, he scales it back in this one and it still works.
Yeah, it's so funny because I really do like Guillermo del Toro movies, but they're usually one and dones for me. So I don't know. I mean, I could see myself rewatching, The Devil's Backbone again. Not Pan's Labyrinth, Orphanage for sure. Watch again.
All right, what's your thoughts on the Changeling?
Changeling, I am also going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 because everything about this movie was amazing in terms of, filming and music and the actors and the fact that they could make a scary movie, like I said, without visuals. But I am taking half a point away because I felt like it was too long. Like I felt like it carried on quite a bit.
And that's what I mean. I would have gave the Ring American version a 3 out of 5 if it hadn't been for the length that I felt in that movie. So
yeah.
I can't disagree with you on that one. It's another 5 out of 5 for me. There's a reason I paired these together because I knew I liked both of them, but going back and rewatching them, I'm like, damn, like one's got the acting, in spades, and that's the Changeling. They both have good stories, but it's just it's like the direction in the Changeling works. Like you said, like they do so much with so little in that movie. Like you don't. Like they still build the horror element up, but you don't have you literally have a guy in a large house. And, it's like that, okay, that doesn't sound that scary, but they make it scary.
Yeah.
They do a good job with it.
These were two good films, and I think back to back they worked really well together.
Yeah, I wanted to group them together for theme. I thought about doing them separately, but I'm like, no, once I started watching The Changeling, I'm like, I think both of them together would be good as comparisons because they both do, like one is more about the visual aspects and more is about the sound aspects. And they both they both have the similar thing of like a ghost child, but all the stuff we discussed as far as the comparisons and the, and that sort of thing between the two of them, I think they work together that way.
Well, we know Llareyna is always constantly searching the continents for her children, and clearly I found one in Japan, but the other one, definitely not the Mexican one. He was too good. So was going to have to be the one in the Changeling. He seemed like a little hellion that I was like, oh, I think that one's mine. But when I'm in the grocery store and he's throwing grocery, cereal boxes around, I'm like, whose kid is that?
Yeah, he's the one that's like breaking the glass in the frozen aisle case, and you're like, okay, I don't know who that kid is, but I'm
gonna go help him find his mama.
Yeah, I'm gonna get him out of here for you, okay?
Oh my God! So what do we have up next?
Next up, because we want to bring Donnie G back in, and there's no perfect, there's no better situation than what I got planned next. We're going to be reviewing The Frighteners from Peter Jackson, because we did discuss in the news Peter Jackson had some help with Damien Eccles, so there's a link there. But and The Entity, and what the two of them have in common is there's a lot of ghost fucking going on. Like one is considered. I guess, in The Frighteners, it's consensual because the hanging judge does get the Egyptian ghost to agree to it, maybe. You don't really see her side of it, so I can't really say that for sure. The Entity, though, that's a one-sided situation, so we'll see how that goes. But was it?
Because there's definitely a true story behind The Entity, so I will be providing those details because I've researched The Entity because it's one of those. Well, it doesn't say inspired by a true story. I believe this one's based on a true story.
It's like The Changeling. It's really, there is a real story that it's kind of written from. So it'd be interesting to hear that, and I'll let you take that research because I want to hear that fresh and see how that story played out.
Yeah, and then now as for The Entity, did we previously talk about this? Because I found it so funny that I was messaging you just today, and I was like, "Hey, are we gonna review this film?" And you're like, "Funny you mention." I don't remember if we talked about it previously.
I don't think we did.
That's so funny.
But I was like, I got it because it was, it's one of the highest rated, like one of the higher rated movies, like recently ghost movies. I got it in, on like a Blu-ray, like special edition, all that. And I thought about it, and I'm like, I want to cover this at some point. And then somebody at work brought it up, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be next because we need to cover this. And since the topic of, that we had this week didn't really lend itself to, Donnie G being involved, I'm like, okay, this is, he can be in on this one because
nothing like some good old fashioned ghost fucking to download the wrong movie and give us a review.
Yeah, and hopefully, it's a little bit more consensual in the movie that he's giving us, but I don't know. If it's a power play BDSM ghost fucking, then hey, whatever he brings up, that's he's the expert. He can tell us on that one.
And if it's a woman ghost, it's automatically, consensual, because if she's the
Oh,
one
yeah.
doing the asking, there's no way the
feel-
guy's going to be like, no.
I feel like that's how it's going to be. Although we did kind of technically cover the entity in a roundabout way when we covered Scary Movie 2, because they directly reference the ghost fucking in that movie.
Absolutely does. So there was definitely hints of that in there, but we're going to give you the real scoop on that. So stay tuned.
So as far as plugs, I mean, I guess Blue Collar BS, they're back up and running again, from what I understand.
Oh yeah, Blue Collar BS is still going every Friday. I mean, sometimes Fridays we miss because Hubs and I like to go visit places every now and then. So that's still going on. Hot Mess Express, you get us when you get us. That's about it. But as for us on Death Holler, man, I never expected to be on Apple charts. And granted, it's in other countries, but the fact that we are on charts at all is impressive. And we put ourselves out there on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to follow us, we are on Facebook. Just search for Death Holler. Same thing on Instagram, Death Holler. Look for us, follow us. We like to post funny memes. We like to post what's up and coming, things like that. But as for that, we haven't paid for any advertisements. We haven't put ourselves out there. So the fact that people are finding us, who are you and how did you find us?
That would be nice to hear. I mean, it's I'm like you. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I mean, it's always nice to hear that sort of thing. I mean, I would like to be able to advertise more, but I mean, neither one of us really has the time or the budget right now to even attempt that. Because I mean, this is a passion project. If anybody didn't know, I mean, we're not making any money on this. In fact, I still owe you money for the RSS feed that I will be sending you shortly. So,
yeah, we go halvesies on stuff so we can afford things. So, but we do it for fun, and it really is a passion project. So, we're going on. This is our second year of doing it. We're going to be going into our third year after October. So,
and the slashing begins.
And we have so much planned. We have so many seasons planned. It's so funny. We have planned further ahead than we even know we're going to be on this earth. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do after slashing season, but I mean, there's witches, that we haven't covered. There's general demonic stuff.
Zombies.
The zombies, of course. I mean, that needs to be, I don't know, I almost feel like that needs to be after slashers, but we'll see. I mean, that's a big one. I mean, we
got to get it over with because I can only, after slasher season is going to be fun for both of us. Ghost season, you've managed to make it through pretty good, and I'm like, haha, this is fun. But zombie season, I'm going to have a really hard time. So we got to rip off the Band-Aid. We got to get it over with because Llareyna does not do zombies very well.
Zombies are my favorite movie genre. They are. I mean, I've got literally beside of me here, I've got a whole shelf of books about zombies, like the production behind zombie movies. So, I mean, it's,
Well, it's so funny because I have graphic novels. Like I have a lot of The Walking Dead. We read World War Z. I've had the Zombie Survival Guide by Max Brooks. Yep. I read that a long time. I love that book. That even inspired me to buy my machete. I have 2 machetes. That's how I'm going to survive.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad tool, but if you remember reading that, there's a Tibetan blade that's actually the best. If you read the book, that's what they suggest. Okay. I don't know how you get that blade.
I have to work with what I got, okay? Like, all I remember is that the machetes require very little maintenance. They're very lightweight. They get the job done. So that's why I have 2 of them. Well, I probably should get more. The kids might need them to defend themselves too, But did you also know, on that tangent, that Max Brooks has a retractable staircase in his mansion?
I did not know that.
Because he's like me. He thinks that zombies are a possibility. And if he's going to have, unless it's like those World War Z zombies, that can just pile up in these huge masses to get to where they're going, he has a retractable staircase so that they can't get up to the 2nd floor. And I'm like, you sir are a genius.
And I got to bring this up here. It's one of my favorite, I got to get it in the shot here. Characters from the Goon comics or whatever, which is like a guy in Tennessee. He basically made like a horror comic or whatever that has 1930s crime noir characters in it or whatever. But it's pretty well done. It's a zombie story, so I like that graphic or series of comics too quite a bit.
Yeah, so in 2024, look out for, or well, I guess the end of 2023 technically.
Yeah, October 2023. I guess the zombies are attacking at that point.
That's when the zombies will attack. But we will be getting October is up and coming. We're going to be getting into the slasher season, so that'll be fun. And yeah, we've got lots planned. So please join us. Get your friends to join. Listen to us. Frick, tell us on our, make comments. Tell us what we could do better, or if there's anything you like or dislike. We want to hear it. So.
Yeah, if there's any kind of like little things that you think that we could add to the show, I mean, we're all ears. I mean, we recent additions with the I think I downloaded the wrong movie. That was Llareyna's idea, and I think that came out pretty good. So,
yeah, I mean, from the people I know that are loving it so much, so that's pretty cool. I am gonna start posting short clips of our episodes coming up soon. That's something the Reverend and I talked about. And we have talked about doing a few very short solo things, but still as part of the Death Holler community. So we're not breaking up. But, sometimes the Reverend has some few things he wants to go and review right now. So we're going to be posting some things. I thought it would be exciting just to kind of have, something in between when we do our episodes. So.
Yeah, a little something to carry over. And, I mean, it's a little too much for the actual episodes, or maybe doesn't connect in, but I mean, they're they might be tangential or play off of them a little bit.
So yeah, I think it'll be great.
And with that, peace be with you
and with your spirit.